Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to Congressman Hern for your work as chairman of the Republican Study Committee Budget Task Force in leading this effort, and also would like to thank RSC Chairman Jim Banks for his outstanding leadership overall of the RSC. This team has done remarkable work to try to keep money where it belongs in the wallets of the hardworking taxpayers. This RSC budget proposal would balance the federal budget within 5 years of implementation, and I'm thrilled to say that it is the most pro-life budget ever. The RSC budget would cut federal spending by $14.4 trillion over 10 years and cut taxes by $1.9 trillion. In fact, it reduces the burden on American taxpayers by nearly $16,000 per household. Unlike Biden's budget buster, this budget prioritizes American families and hardworking taxpayers. I'm proud to have served as a member of this RSC Budget Task Force, and this budget is historic for two reasons. First, it unapologetically and unequivocally affirms the conservative values that we were elected to fight for. Second, it courageously addresses our unsustainable entitlement programs, preserves and protects our commitment to American seniors and those nearing retirement, builds the framework for responsible fiscal management, and secures the future for younger generations of Americans. The RSC budget contains many of the conservative principles that I have fought for since my first day in office nearly 6 months ago. From protecting people of faith from government intrusion, to shielding small businesses from the heavy hand of government regulations, to putting the needs of our students before the teachers' unions, this RSC budget contains many pieces of legislation that I've personally introduced, including my ALERT Act, which will require monthly updates from executive agencies about any rules they're working on, including the cost to taxpayers of those regulations. My Article 1 Regulatory 1 Budget Act would restore direct, accountable congressional control of the federal regulatory system, as the founders intended, and require a budget from the president for all regulatory costs, similar to the annual budget for other taxes and spending. My Right to Earn a Living Act would prevent Congress from subsidizing costly lockdown policies like those handed down by state and local Democrat officials. As a free market conservative, I know there's no better way to stimulate our economy than by opening it up and turning the American people loose. Congress cannot continue bailing out the poorly run states whose economies have been devastated by these lockdown orders. My Protecting Religion from Government Act seeks to preserve all Americans' First Amendment rights by allowing citizens to sue state or local governments that seek to prevent or regulate religious services. Government has no constitutional authority over religion. My Students Before Unions Act would put children first and make COVID funding contingent upon the transparency of local teachers' unions. And my bill to repeal the Jim Crow-era Davis-Bacon Act that requires the federal government to pay the prevailing wage would end this inexcusable long-held practice that drives up the price for taxpayer-funded construction and eliminates opportunities for hardworking Americans. And finally, my SHUSH Act would deregulate firearm suppressors at the federal level and preempt state laws that regulate, tax, or prohibit the possession of suppressors. No constitutional right should be at risk to public opinion or subject to regulatory and tax burdens. As a freshman, I'm truly grateful and humbled to have so many of my bills included in this budget, second only to the number submitted by our chairman, Jim Banks. At $28 trillion of debt that we have now, that equates to about $85,000 per American citizen. Every time we recklessly and foolishly spend another $1 trillion, that's about $10,000 per household. This is unsustainable. The majority in this administration is at best economically and fiscally illiterate and incompetent, or at worst, they are intentionally crushing our financial future and our very republic. Our work on this conservative budget shows that it's possible to do what the Democrats seem to find impossible: balance the budget through practical solutions that put American taxpayers first while preserving the values that have made this the greatest country in history. Thank you, Chairman Hern, for your leadership in crafting this budget that deserves a vote in the House Budget Committee and on this very floor so the American people can see if their representatives are serious about fighting inflation and restoring our fiscal sanity. And I yield back.